After you watch Lover, Killer, Stalker on Netflix, you're going to want to go delete your Plenty of Fish, delete your Facebook dating app, Grindr, Scruff, whatever you got, get rid of it, because this one is going to take you on a ride. And we're going to talk about it in today's video. Yo, Roscoe, myself, this chair, and Huge Casino have been all snuggled up during this cold weather, having a blast. And I want to thank them for sponsoring the video, and I want to tell you about Huge Casino. So Huge Casino offers over 100 online casino games, from retro classics to modern slot machines, and they're all inspired by real slots. I mean, there are literally so many games to choose from through here. You can also play favorites like blackjack, roulette, poker, you name it. It just goes on and on and on. Now, also, you can join to play with your friends and compete in the Hello Billionaires League. Now, one of my favorite aspects of this is just that, the variety of that, but also it's this game called Wilds of the Arctic, and I guess because I have this whole thing of wanting to go to Alaska and do all that, I love playing this because I like the vibe of it with the little polar bear and the moose and stuff like that. I have that kind of stuff around my house, so especially with it being winter time, and that's one thing I love about this, is there's like different games with different themes that kind of match your mood and vibe as to what's going on. And it's so cute the way you sit here and spin, and just like the little Arctic look, and it's so amazing, and the little polar bear and all that, I absolutely love it. And you can win cute little things on here. Now remember, this is all for entertainment purposes only. This isn't real money, this isn't real stuff on here, okay? So just keep that in mind. It's all for fun. Level up, we got a new slot unlocked. Another thing I like is the more you play, it unlocks other games, other slots, that type thing, so it stays fresh. There's literally so many things on here. I don't know if you would ever be able to run out of games and options. And again, it's just so cozy. I absolutely love this. So it's free to download on iOS or Android. And now here's the thing, just remember, this is entertainment only. They're not offering real money, and there's no opportunity to win like real prizes, any of that. So this is just fun and games. There's also a brace yourself, buckle your seatbelts up, a 5 million chips welcome bonus. Okay. So download Huge Casino from the link in my description. It really helps the Sofa Squad out here at the channel. So again, don't forget, click the link in my description to download Huge Casino. You're going to get this 5 million chips. It really helps the channel. So go ahead, go on, give it a try. Hello, Sofa Squad, and welcome back to the sofa. Sofa's back there. Roscoe's on it. He's not doing bath time, which is amazing. My name's Paul. Neither am I. I'm just sitting in front of the sofa. Today we're going to be talking about another Netflix documentary. This one is called Lover, Killer, Stalker. This has been a recent one on there, and it has taken the nation by storm, shall we say. Now, here's the way this video is going to work. First of all, what we do is we typically do a live chat and talk about these on the podcast channel. So make sure you're subbed to it if you're not, you know what I'm saying. But then I'll do the edited version for this channel over here for people who don't like that live chat vibe. So that's all this is. So what I do is I literally watch the documentary and I make notes on my phone while I'm watching it. Commentary if you're hanging out with me watching it in person. And then I just come here and do the same thing, but with y'all. So there's not going to be video clips, that type of stuff. There'll be pictures up and whatnot. So just keep that in mind. Now, if you do want to follow Mr. Roscoe and Mr. Paul outside of the YouTubes, maybe on the Instagram, go on, sign up. It's on the screen. It's in the description. Give it a follow. We do fancy stuff, you know. We know how to use filters and reels and fancy things, okay? So anyways, let's go ahead and just jump on into it. So like I said, the name of this is Lover, Stalker, Killer. I might have mixed that order up earlier, but that's the name of it. It's on Netflix. Now this is basically a love triangle turned fatal. That's your 60-second overview, okay? Because this is one that you just have to hear it play out to hear it, okay? It's that crazy. So what happens is it starts off, and you know how these documentaries are, they'll start off with like the ending at the beginning, a quick clip of it. And so it does just that. It starts off with the 911 call of a woman calling 911. She's been injured or shot, and obviously this creates some distress in you. And then they say this is a love triangle turned fatal. Now, it takes us to the year 2000, and there's a gentleman, his name is Dave. He's a mechanic at a truck stop. Now, a woman will get a job at said truck stop, blonde hair, good looking woman. She starts working there, and they start going out, and they very quickly fall head over heels for each other. Now, they end up working opposite shifts, and over time, this basically just makes them grow apart. The relationship doesn't doesn't last. Now, they do end up having kids and this kind of thing, but they end up going their separate ways, and they do get separated. And he moves to Omaha, Nebraska, and he'll get an apartment, a new job. He's 35 years old. So you can imagine, like, hey, let's go. I'm ready to, get out here and start living again and see what this single life is all about. And so he does just that. Now, he will sign up for Plenty of Fish, but he says he's not looking for anything serious. Now, pause, sofa side note. Y'all, I have never heard of anything. Well, I take that back. The majority of stories that I hear from Plenty of Fish are nightmares, okay? I do know one couple, I just thought of when I said that is married with children and very happy. However, that being said, if you want to spill your Plenty of Fishy, go on. Just don't put yourself out there in the comment section, but we're here for it. Because I've heard some cringy stuff, y'all. And these things, you can meet the love of your life, but they're also very dangerous. So anyways, let's keep going. Okay, so he's on Plenty of Fish. He's not looking for anything serious. Eventually, he meets this woman named Liz. She loves animals. She has a cleaning company. They have lots of common interest. They both have kids. So they plan to meet eventually, right? That's the next step. And when they do, they hit it off. Okay, and it was like this perfect fit at this time in his life, right? He said right from the first day, he made it very clear to her, to Liz, like, I don't want to be tied down. Now, when he's saying this, I'm listening to this, I'm like, this is just your stereotypical story you hear of these dating things. The guy gets on there, I'm just looking for fun, I don't want to get tied down, but I do want the benefits of the relationship, you know what I'm saying? Which I'm not trying to say anything, but I'm listening to him saying that, and I'm just like, dude, I can already tell you how this is probably going to end, right? But at least he was upfront. He said his piece. This is what I'm looking for. You can't ask for any more than that, right? Because the other opposite end of that is somebody getting on there and just telling women what they want to hear, or vice versa, telling men, whoever, what they want to hear to get what they want. And nobody likes that, right? So he's like, look, I don't want to be tied down. This is just fun. I got this situation. Here we go. So they're doing their thing, right? And this is casual thing, and he thinks everything's cool. And it was, right? So then a woman named Carrie comes into his life. Now, she basically comes into his place of work, and at first sight, he's like, whoa, mama, I want to work under your hood today. And he talks to her and everything. She's a customer at the mechanic place that he managed. So even though he's like, oh, baby, at the same time, he's like, I was the manager of this place. It's a customer, keeping it professional, right? So they have this interaction. 2 weeks later, he's back online on the dating profiles, and he sees her, and he's like, hey, baby, I know you. And she's like, hey, baby, I know you too. So they end up making a date. And he says that she told him about her life. She'd grown up locally. She has a child. And at a young age, she went back to college. She had a career. And he said that she was smart, sexy, and way out of his league. But like on one of these dates or whatever, he was like, hey, baby, you want to come back to my place? And she was like, sure. And he's like, he probably didn't know what to do. The way he acted is he was almost like, I wasn't expecting a woman of this caliber, to do that. So what do we do from here? Right? So he's like, okay, cool. So they go back to the place. He says when they get there, and this is when the creepiness starts to come in, y'all. When they get there, he says they hadn't even taken their jackets off, and somebody's ringing the doorbell, and it's Liz. And she's like, oh, hey, I left something in the apartment. I need to come in and get it. He said it's, already know the awkwardness. Like just hearing it and seeing it when I watched it, I wanted to crawl under the sofa, okay? I was like, oh my God. Like, this is just bad. So Carrie leaves, and Liz comes in. She gets what she needs, whatever she leaves. So then Carrie calls, and she's like, look, I'm almost back at my place. Why don't you just come over? Kind of a thing. And so he's like, okay. And so he goes over there, and she's like, look, this is, again, it is what it is. We're not boyfriend, girlfriend. We're not monogamous. We just met. You got this girl coming over. It is, we're just having fun right now. Well, of course, this dude, this is right up his alley. He's like, okay, awesome. Because think about this. What a mood killer that would be if you went to somebody's house for the first time, and then another, whatever your situation is, whether it's another female or another male, whatever, shows up and is talking about, I need to come in and get something, and kind of making obvious, like, they probably had something going on at one point. Very awkward. So anyways, so they're not monogamous, all that. So it turns out that she worked 3 blocks away from his apartment, and they end up spending a lot of time like working around each other. She'll spend the night a lot, and it sounds like to me the beginning of a relationship, right? So he says one day he gets up to go to work, he gives her a kiss, goodbye, and he heads out, and he had no idea what was coming that day, what was headed down the pipeline that would change his entire life. He says about 10:30 he gets a text from Carrie, and she's like, hey, we should move in together. And he's like, girl, it's been 2 weeks. And that right there sets her off, okay? And he's like, I thought we talked about this. Like, we've been going out for 2 weeks. And then she's blowing his phone up, okay? You ruined my life. Everything's horrible. You're awful, awful, awful. And he's like, you can imagine, like, what? Like, where did this come from, okay? So he goes home at lunch and she's cleaned out all of her stuff. And he's bummed, of course, right? He's like, you know, you can imagine, like, if you're vibing with somebody and it's going along, number one, all of a sudden you get a text message 2 weeks into something talking about let's move in together. Red flag, red sofa flag immediately, right? That's super creepy. And then to be like, you know, you ruined my life, you destroyed me. So, I mean, that's scary, right? But that don't touch anything that we're about to get into. So a couple of days go by and she starts blowing his phone up again, talking about, I'm going to destroy the things you care about. I hate you. And the text got more mean or meaner, however you say that, more threatening, the whole 9 yards. And I'm not just talking 1 or 2 texts, y'all. As we get into this and you hear the amount of evidence, your mouth's going to be on the floor. Okay. You're going to be like, well, how is that even humanly possible to text and email somebody this much, right? Okay, so the narrative switches to Carrie's mother, Nancy. And Nancy says that during that time, Carrie was like very much her own person, right? She would let you know exactly what she was thinking. And the mother was aware of this new relationship, but didn't like know him or, you know what I'm saying? Like the appropriate amount that a parent's probably gonna know, like, yeah, start seeing a guy, we're talking, that kind of thing, right? But then all of a sudden, Carrie goes AWOL. Can't get a hold of her. Nothing's happening. So there's that. They put that on the back burner. We switch back over to Dave as far as the narrative goes. So Dave's like, one day I'm at work and this other dude comes up and he's like, hey, the sheriff's up front looking for you. And he's like, okay. So he goes up there and he's like, what's up? And they're like, do you know Carrie? This woman named Carrie. And he's like, yeah. And they're like, well, look, there's a missing persons report out from her. And you're her boyfriend. Like, you know, what's up? You can imagine, right? He's just like, oh, you know, okay. So he pulls his phone up and he's like, bro, look at this. So like anyone would, reading these horrifying messages that she sent and like tons of them, the cops are like, oh, okay, this is someone in the throes of something. This is someone, you know, this is whatever. It sounds like it gets dropped, right? And it's probably actually switching to, not at this point, but the gears are switching to a missing person, but this is like, she's breaking the law, right? That kind of thing. So it just kind of goes, just whatever, it filters out. Not the stalking, but just the police interest. Okay, so they go back to Carrie's mother, and she says that shortly after Carrie goes missing, she files the missing persons report. She starts getting these messages on Facebook, and it's from Carrie. And she's doing things like, I'm not missing, I just don't want to see you, I don't want to come home right now, give me my space, that kind of a thing. And the mom's kind of like, okay, I know she's her own person, you know, this is odd, but maybe, you know, I mean, daughters have their moments, and that kind of a thing. So there was just this vibe that, you know, it was like, this doesn't seem right, but on the same note, you know, okay, I'll give you your space a little bit. So goes back over to Dave, the narrative. And as you can see by now, I literally make these notes in the way that the documentary is showing it. So you know how they work. They just switch from person to person to person. So that's why I'm trying to say the narrative to keep everybody in line here. Anyways, so Dave says he heard from Liz, who shows up at his apartment one day. She shows him her car and it has been keyed. After that, he starts getting like mega crazy messages from Carrie. And then Carrie starts messaging Liz all sorts of crazy stuff. The narrative switches back to a detective who worked in the stalking, like that kind of division. And he says that he went through all the emails that were sent, and this looked like the beginning stages of stalking. And I'm like, the beginning stages? My God almighty, please. I'm talking about we're in the throes of it. But, you know, obviously it's edited a certain way. He says this looks like the beginning stages of stalking. And he says that he ended up, you know, this ended up being the most strangest, most bizarre, most insane case he's ever dealt with. And you'll see why. It's already weird, right? So now we go back to his narrative. He's at a coffee shop and he's getting text messages while he's like having his coffee and whatnot. And the text messages are things like, can you see me? I can see you. How's your coffee? And he says that the first few days, the text messages came from her phone number, from Carrie's. But then after that, they were coming from multiple numbers. And the same thing happened with the emails. And he says he was getting like 125 a day. Okay. And that's on a bad day. So imagine shooting out, that's emails, imagine shooting out outside of work 125 emails. What? Pardon me? There's no way. Okay, so the detective that's working the case basically then has to do a stakeout, but like from the opposite way. So he's staking out Dave at work to get a vibe of where is this person hiding out? Where is she? Where she can obviously see him because she'll be texting him at work talking about, I just saw you talk to that, fill in the word, the explicitive, woman or whatever. And so it's obvious that he's like, I'm literally being watched wherever I go all day long. So this detective is doing the stakeout. He's doing that and he has Carrie's photo and he's like walking around the neighborhood. Do you know this woman? Do you know this woman? Have you seen this woman? Nobody's seen her, right? Nobody. So it's just like, how is she doing this? It's very bizarre. And so the detective's like, the thing with this case is that before I can do anything, I have to be able to find her. We have not been able to put eyes on Carrie. So then Dave's going about his life, very paranoid, very scared. Then, shocker, buckle your sofa seatbelt. Carrie texts Dave and is like, oh, you're trying to find me with a cop? Well, guess what? I live in your apartment complex 2 buildings down and this is my address. This is my unit number. Well, you already know Dave's like, what do you do? So he's like, I'm going to go confront her. And he's like, I'm walking down there to go. And he's like, I'm getting more scared and more scared as I'm going. Like, you can imagine like, what do I say? And has she been living here? And this is crazy. So it's like, it was like building 12 or something like that she lives in. And he's like, okay, building 10, 11, and there is no building 12. He was just messing with her. Well, then he's like, she's probably living in here somewhere. I mean, where could she be? So this is the level. And he's getting more and more beside himself. Then one day, he starts getting messages from her, and she's inside Liz's house, apartment, whatever it was, and she's sending him pictures from the inside of it. And he's like, oh my God. So he goes over to Liz's house and they see that, yes, her car has been keyed in the garage and spray painted inside the house. It's like this, you can imagine the kind of spray paints, right? And he's like, I really felt like Liz, she was this completely innocent victim. And essentially it kind of makes them get back together a little bit because he's obviously going to feel like, my God, this woman's coming after her. She's threatening her. She's in her house. Like, I have to protect her. So the narrative then switches back to Dave's original wife. Her name's Amy. So the one that he has the kids with. Now, she said that she knew it was going on. They still had split custody, and the kids would go over there on the weekends. Well, this stalking thing gets her so scared, she's like, absolutely not. If you want to see the kids, you need to come over here. I do not want my children in your house. And I'm like, amen, girl. You know what I'm saying? Like, 100% don't blame her. Absolutely. So this is the deal. Well, you can put 2 and 2 together as you can imagine what would happen with him going over to her house. So one day he's at work and he gets a phone call from Liz and she says one of his windows is smashed out and it looks like somebody has been in his apartment. And inside there's nasty writings around the wall and Liz's clothes have all been slashed. Now the narrative switches back to the detective who says at this point in the investigation, he had enough for an arrest warrant, which is fine, but he cannot put his hands on Carrie. So it's like, we have to find her. Now, Dave says that he is living in this constant paranoia and it's taking a major toll on him. He's spending a lot of time at the bar. He just wanted to stay away, escape, and it's really breaking him down mentally, as you can imagine. Then he gets a text message one day, and this is like, I know it's already game-changing, but this is like game-changing. And she's like, look, I set Liz's house on fire, so have fun with that. Well, obviously he goes over there, Liz is there, her kids are fine, but the animals have all died. And her house is burnt up. Now, the detective will say that he interviews Liz at the scene and she tells him all about Carrie. Then, after this, Liz will move and not tell Dave where she moved to. So then Dave decides, I can't anymore, I'm done. I'm moving, I'm getting a new job, I'm getting a new phone, I'm starting a new life. And 1 year will go by. Now the narrative will now switch over to another detective. His name is Jim, and he's in the, I'm going to maybe say this wrong, the Pottawatomie County Sheriff's Department. Now he says that he's aware of this missing person case with Carrie and how they can't find her, but like all this other stuff is going on, like this complications of this case. And he's basically like wanting to like look into her case again and be like, what's up? So then Jim and another detective, Ryan, take this case over and they go visit Carrie's mother in Iowa. And at this time, it had been a couple of years since she'd even seen her. You know, you can imagine it's kind of a cold case, that type thing. And she says that she got texts such as her saying, I'm going to work and this place and making all this money. And basically she's like, she just ghosted us. You know, she's like, I'm going to work. I don't want to come home. I'm doing this. I'm doing that. Essentially, leave me alone. Now, the detectives start looking into Carrie and learn that she has some mental health issues. And they fear that what happened is like the narrative they start kind of forming is like, oh my God, like, you know, she stopped taking her meds. And this, like, all this is going through like a personality, you know, mental health crisis or whatever. And that brought in the stalking and all that type of stuff and the vanishing. And it was just all a mental health crisis. So keep that in mind. The narrative then switches back to Dave. And it's been a while. And, you know, it's kind of like things are laying low. And so he gets back onto the dating sites. I mean, when they said this part, y'all, I was like, oh my God. You already know it. So you already know what I'm about to say. You don't even have to listen to it. You already know, right? So you already know. So he gets on the sites and all that. He starts talking to this woman. He's like, oh, hey, baby, you want to meet up? And so he goes and he's waiting and waiting and waiting. And, you know, the waiter's like, hey, you got stood up, boy? And he's like, yeah. So then he's sitting there and he's like about to leave and he gets a text from her. And it's like, it's not me, it's Carrie. And you already know he was like, oh my God. Well, obviously he has allowed her back into his life, not meaning to, but she has his information, right? So he says this time the stalking got way worse, y'all. And his ex-wife, Amy, and the kids were a target now. Now, Amy says she starts getting messages from Carrie telling her to stay away from Dave, that she wants to get rid of her. And then the text messages and these threats will start involving the children. And Carrie is seemingly able to stalk and watch her with the kids, tell her exactly what she's doing, what they're wearing. Scary, scary stuff. As a parent, you can only imagine how much that would absolutely frighten you to know that somebody is watching your family like this. So you already know they are beside themselves, right? Now, Dave will go out and get a gun. I mean, he's to this point, like something, I know when you say something really bad is going to happen, it's like, bro, it already did, but like even worse, right? So the narrative goes back to those two detectives who I was talking about, and they say they have no proof that Carrie actually exists, right? They're just like, other than like, yes, we know she exists, but there's a point in time where she no longer seems to exist and we cannot prove that she still exists type thing. So all her belongings were still in her house when she left. So remember how a minute ago I talked about the mental health thing? Well, one of that things is they're like, well, she had all these meds, but she stopped taking them. So maybe this triggered a chain of events that led to a mental health crisis. Because essentially they're like, we're going back over the evidence of this case and looking at her place. And they're like, it doesn't look like someone who packed up to leave for a job or anything like that. This is like somebody walked out their front door and disappeared off the face of the earth. Now, her mom will say that during this time, her father, Carrie's father, the mother's husband, obviously, was not doing well healthy. Basically, he's into life type situation. Nothing from Carrie. And the mom was like, she was like, you know, she might do her own thing. We might have her moments. That was weird. This is not her, right? So this is major red flag. So as the cops are going through all of this evidence and, you know, doing all this, there is so much digital evidence and they don't find him. They have this IT guy that works for him. He does like volunteer work. He does all this type of stuff. Very genius type vibes. And so he comes in and starts working on this case. Now, Tony is his name and he's like a digital forensic, you know, tech IT person. So he said there is hundreds of thousands of texts and emails over a 2-year period. Let that sink in. Imagine that level of contact. You're talking hundreds a day. This person's blowing stuff up. So he's like, there was tons of it. Now, IP addresses were at the center of this. And so they're like, look, if we can figure out the IP address, we can figure out where this stuff is coming from. So the IP addresses were being hidden with the VPN service and other things. And he writes this program called Dex, and it helps him crack the code. So out of millions of IP addresses, he asked it a question like, how many of these are unique? And the Dex program narrows it down to like 13,000. And then he's like, okay, what are the top 10 IP addresses in this case? And it spits them out. Well, out of those, 8 of them are VPN. He basically can't do anything with it. But then there was one that could be used. Now, y'all brace yourself. If you didn't already put the damn sofa seatbelt on, go on, buckle up. Roscoe, hold on to your blankie. Just settle down, everybody. They trace it back, and it goes to a man named Todd in Iowa. Guess who Todd works for? Go on, guess. He works for Tony. Okay? They're like, yeah, yeah, this is awkward. This is really awkward. So they get a search warrant. They obviously have to be careful because this is, the call is coming from inside the house. You know what I'm saying? This dude has access to all the stuff. So they go, they're searching stuff, and they're like, bro, has anybody, like, been here, or like, what's up? Like, who else has access to all the stuff in here? And he's like, well, I have an on again, off again girlfriend who moved in with me after her house burned down. Her name is Liz. I just got goosebumps, y'all. Now, here's the thing. Earlier on in here when I was doing it, and I'm not trying to sound like, yeah, crack a case, show, yeah. I mean, you already know, right? This is just the damn sofa. Very soon into it, I made a note up here that said, I'm getting vibes that Liz is impersonating Carrie. And I read it through my notes. I was like, don't say that. Don't say that. Let everyone have their moment. Let everyone have their moment. Come to it if you haven't watched it. Y'all, when I tell you, when they confirmed that, I came off the damn sofa, did 3 jumping jacks, and had to buckle myself back in. Because it changes everything, right? So everything, she's been living there for years, using his Wi-Fi for years, right? Everything ties back to her. Now, they take this information back to Dave, and they're like, they tell him, buckle up on the sofa, because it's about to be a wild ride. And they tell him, and obviously he's floored. You have to, he's like, you have to literally comb back over everything and let it sink in. And he's like, and unfortunately, sadly, tragically, at the center of it, I'm only left to assume that Carrie is probably dead. You know what I mean? Because knowing this information, it's like, so not good, but at least they're finding out the answers. So the detectives are now like, okay, wait, hold on. This has now completely changed everything. We need to go back over the evidence again with a completely different lens on. So they start going through stuff, and they find a picture of Carrie's vehicle on Liz's phone. Now, they'll go back over the car, painstakingly run it for everything you imagine. They find a fingerprint on like a mint tin can in the car that matches Liz. So they have now tied Liz physically to the car of Carrie, a woman who is seemingly missing. So then they put a tracker on Liz's car, and guess where one of her favorite places to go? You probably already know. Amy's house. Dave's former wife and kids. And right? It gives me goosebumps. The cops are like, whoa, like, we are very, very afraid for Amy and the children. This is bad. Like, and it is, right? Because we already see what she's willing to do. But she's willing to go even lower. So then Dave comes home from a day at work one day. He goes in and immediately he's like, something was different. My gun case was out. Someone stole my gun. Remember I told you about a gun earlier? Then the narrative of the documentary switches back to that 911 phone call. So remember how I told you at the beginning, it introduced us to a woman calling 911 talking about I've been shot? Now we're here. We're at that part of the story. Liz calls 911 from a park, and she's like, I've been shot. I don't know who did it. It was a female. Come save me. It was like in her leg. So she's basically like, she goes in and she doesn't know who it was, but she's already set things up so to make it look like it was Amy, basically. So Amy's like, I'm at home, police are banging on my door, open up please, guns drawn. And I'm like, what? Like, what's going on? She's like, I'm gonna get arrested. Like, what's happening here? So once Liz recovers, she goes to the police station for an interview. Now, here's the thing. They already know, they're like, Liz is turned up, right? But they tell Liz that Amy is the prime suspect, even though they believe that Liz did this to herself. Okay, so in the interview, she seems like she's trying to set Amy up for the shooting and for Carrie's murder. So she's like, oh, Amy did this and she hated Carrie and she said this and she said that to me. And the cops play this game. They're like, yeah, oh yeah, definitely. We need evidence on her. We need to get her. Just like the guy in the documentary said, this is a classic case of Liz was playing checkers, they were playing chess. Okay. So they're all like, we need this evidence. She's reaching out and saying all this stuff to you. Like, we need this. You already know what Liz did. I love how they just do this to themselves for justice reasons and pure sheer entertainment. Liz goes home and starts manufacturing emails from Amy to her and then sends it to the investigator. And I'm like, granted, we already know Liz is not, something. But even in the You know, why would you even for 1 second think that that would be a logical thing to go do right away? It's like, let that sit for like 3 weeks. Again, she's playing checkers, they're playing chess. I would have let that sit for like a month or two. Not Liz. She said, hold my beer. And she went off, okay? So during this time period, they can't arrest her yet. They're building a case, but it's not strong enough yet. Now, obviously, like I said, Amy and Dave, they are super nervous for their safety. So the detective records a phone call that he makes to Dave. And this is like an intentional thing. And he's basically like, look, as a father, as a man, you need to move back in with her, even if it means you get back together to protect them youngins and Amy. Y'all need to get back together. And it's that whole narrative. You can already understand, right, where this is going, right? They know that by doing this, Miss Thing's about to have an absolute breakdown. So then they play a phone call that Liz makes to the detectives, and she's all upset. And she's like, why haven't you arrested anyone yet? Why does she get to kill somebody and she gets to move back in with Dave and get Dave back? You can tell she is unhinged, y'all, okay? And they tell her, we can't do anything. We need more specific details. Like, you need to let us know if she gives you specific details of the crime. None of this correspondence says that. We're stuck. Y'all, this is where Liz says, literally, say no more. She's on one screen of the phone with them. She's like, please hold, flipping over. I mean, she couldn't type it fast enough, y'all. I'm talking about coming unglued. Because now her plan has backfired. And it's like, wait a minute, my plan backfired. She got my man. It ain't good, right? So she starts literally straight up telling on herself. Literally that night, they get an email from Liz forwarding it from Amy with all the details of the murder of Carrie. Now, the common theme of, they'll call them the confession emails, because it's not just one, it's like she goes on with it. And tragically, I mean, it's bad. She died in a stabbing type way. There was mutilation. There was fire. It was bad, okay? Carrie met a completely unjust end. I can only fathom, because remember, rewind this thought process real quick. She only meets Liz very briefly, passing Liz at what's his name's apartment when Liz is like, oh, I left something in there. That's it. Well, we already know that this set Liz off, and she probably followed her home or something and took her life, and we'll get into like where it happened and that type thing, or most likely happened here in a minute. Okay, so like I said, the common theme was that, the stabbing. So they go back to the car. They got the fingerprint. They're like, now let's check for blood. So they do that spray test everywhere. Nothing. And they're like, they already knew she had done a good job cleaning it. So then they're like, well, let's rip the pleather or the leather off the seats or whatever. Well, that's when they see all the dried up blood and they know, okay, this is where she met her fate. So then they arrest Liz, right? And they have her in the little room and they're questioning her. Y'all, it doesn't matter the evidence that they give to her. She denies everything. I mean, they are like, this came from your house in this way. I did not do that. Nope. Absolutely denies it. And maybe in her demented world, she believes that. Now, she gets charged with first-degree M. Now, the state and all these people, they'll say this trial is incredibly tricky. There's nobody. Number one, there's nobody. Number two, the story is so over the top. It's like you have to walk a jury through this and have them believe that this, because it's like literally you can't write a fiction story about it. You know what I'm saying? It's that turned up. So literally all these people we've mentioned, the detectives, the IT guy, the state, all these people, they are like, we are working, God bless them. It gives me goosebumps. We are working 12, 14-hour days to bring justice to Carrie. It literally chokes me up because this is just one of the silver linings when somebody's life is extinguished like this in this manner and they're just thrown out by their perpetrator like trash. To see people come together to want to bring justice in their name. And it's not only justice for Carrie, but keep this in mind. Liz had this whole town convinced that Carrie was a nut job, that Carrie had gone off the rocker. Everyone thought for a while that Carrie was stalking this dude. So not only has she done this to Carrie, but she's just desecrated all over her name and reputation. So they all are working around the clock. Their personal lives are taking a toll to lead up to trial. Now, during this process of preparation, they continually go over and like interview Dave just to rake over the same information. Is there anything? What one of the meetings, they just by chance were like, look, do you have any kind of technology that you haven't given us or anything? And he's like, you know what? I do have this old iPad in storage. So he goes and gets it. He gives it to him and to the IT guy. And he's like, I pull it up. There's nothing on it. There's an old old SD card or whatever you call those things in there. Nothing's on it. And he's like, but I just wanted to make double sure. So he's like, I go in and you know how they can like see what's been deleted? So he's like, he gets into that part of this card. Well, he's like, all like thousands of these pictures are on there. And he's like, and there's a selfie of Liz and another selfie and this and that and the other and da-da. And he's like, this is the old card to Liz's phone. Now there's one photo that he comes across and he's like, this just looks weird. It's like a rotten piece of wood or something. And he zooms in on it, he's looking at it and like the markings on it. And so he looks it up, like this term for something. And it's basically like, this is the term for what veins do in a body during, after you've died. And he's like, huh. Interesting. And he's like, well, in that context, this looks like a foot. And in that context, that looks like a tattoo on this foot. So they go to Carrie's mother and they're like, does your daughter, this part really gets me. They're like, does your daughter have a tattoo on her foot? And she's like, yes. And it's a Chinese symbol for mother. I can barely say it without crying. Y'all, I mean, just the irony of it. Like she was crying out for her mother through those pictures. Oh my God, I don't have my little plate to wave here. So now granted, it's a foggy picture, or you know what I mean? Like it's not a good picture, but nonetheless, they're like, we have a picture of her deceased foot on camera. Like we can get doctors to testify, all this type of stuff, right? So look at all the evidence we've talked about here, right? And that's just like a clincher. Like we don't have the body, but here you go. Now, another tragic, sad part to this is Carrie's mother, when they talked to her, she's like, I didn't really even know the depth of what happened to Carrie until we got to trial. And she was like, it's my daughter, and this monster destroyed her. So the mother will learn of these things. It's terrible. Now, when the judge goes off to kind of decide the case is presented, all that, the judge comes out and the state and everybody is like, and you hear the judge say, he's like, the state did not meet their burden of like proving that the body was there or whatever. And they're literally bracing themselves for like, oh my gosh, she's going to get away with this. She's going to get away with this. But then the judge starts talking and you can tell it's turning. And he's basically like, come on. You know what I'm saying? Like, put two and two. There's this woman disappeared off the face of the earth. You've got the evidence on your phone. All this stalking we proved you've done. It's clear what happened here. And thank you, Lord, he finds her guilty. Now, she is sentenced to prison, life, no parole. Amen. Now, here's the thing. So that's the story via the Netflix documentary. I'm sure there's tons more on it and other rabbit holes you can go down, but that's via the documentary and what I saw on that. Now, a couple of things here. First of all, when they show Liz at various different places, this is being like, whatever. You could take one look at her and be like, oh, this one is off her rocker, right? I mean, something ain't right. You know how some people, especially in this world that we live in where we watch true crime and trials and things of that nature, where a lot of times you can see the perpetrators and there's something not right going on. So there's that. The amount of effort and energy that it takes into trying to destroy someone's life in this manner is absolutely shocking. And what I mean by trying to destroy somebody's life is I'm talking about Dave. Now, obviously, part of destroying his life was destroying everyone around him, starting with Carrie. Carrie was the direct threat. Carrie was in the wrong place at the wrong time, right? And we see this oftentimes in these cases, these love triangles where somebody doesn't know they're in the love triangle and lives are lost. The fact that she was able to pull this off, now look back over that. She burnt her own house down and killed all her animals. Surprised she didn't leave the children in there. Very surprised over that. Keyed her own car, cut up her own clothes, was probably at times sitting there having dinner and sleeping with Dave while texting him and, you know what I'm saying, like stalking him and doing all this stuff. She really thought she got away with it. She thought she was smarter than the system and him. And I mean, for a while she did, right? But eventually there's always something that catches them up, right? And luckily that finally happened in here. Now, also what took place is Carrie's name was able to be restored. Because remember what Dave said, it's like, this woman was out of my league. Like, she's smart, she's this, she's that. And then everybody's like, oh God, she went off the rocker and all that. So her reputation, her name was restored, right? Also, luckily, Amy and the children were never harmed or anything other than the fear that comes with that, right? There is harm that comes, mental harm, emotional harm from, being a victim of a stalker like this. It goes to show, and like Dave said, you never really know who someone is. Clearly what happened is a couple of weeks into this situationship, whatever you want to call it, Liz was not happy. She knows she's following him around. She sees he's probably seen other women. And all the things she was saying that Carrie was saying were her. In her world, he destroyed her life. In her world, it was, you're the awful person. One thing I go back to is the first text messages that she sent from Carrie saying, let's move in. What if he had said yes? What if he had said yes? What would Liz have done then? She would have come up with something, right? I can only imagine how long this man had to sit there and just be like, what? The fear of knowing that you were sleeping with the enemy, literally, right? I mean, this is bunnies on the stove type stuff. If you know what I'm talking about, you know what I'm talking about. So, that being said, if you have not watched this is one to watch, okay? It is good. And I don't mean to put that down in the terms of because lives were lost, right? What I'm talking about is the way it was filmed, the way the story was told is good. It's tragic, obviously, in that a life was lost and that these people were victimized in this way. But as far as storytelling goes and the way it's laid out, it's a very well put together documentary that's presenting this case, this story, these lives for us to learn about. So that's it. If you're still watching, I know this was a long one. I do appreciate it. Thank you to everybody who helps make the channel possible, the Patreons and members, everybody in the Sofa Squad that hangs out, talks with me and where Roscoe. And now don't forget, he wants you to go drop some of these little blue sofas off down in the comment section. And until we meander our way down there to talk to y'all down there, we'll see y'all soon.